Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Pandora, as well as the latest episode of the 100. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time and start talking about each of those respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I'd say about this week's episode of Pandora, you can skip to what I'd say about this week's episode of the 100. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Pandora. A lot of interesting things went down. Interestingly enough, I can't speak like normal, but a lot of interesting things went down, so let's break it down. It was a very Atria-centric episode, interestingly enough, and it's actually kind of like a darker episode in certain regards, just because of like the nature of what the episode's about. Because it's interesting, because like obviously we learned in the first episode, like, oh, she killed her master, so that's how she was able to get her emancipation and everything, which I also brought up. I was like, they're just like, the school is just cool with that. It's like, okay, I guess because it's such a new area of like clones getting emancipated, or maybe because they knew the truth. I'll get to that soon enough, but maybe that's why they let it slide. But I guess for her sake, she perpetuates the story of like she killed her master. Like I said, I'll get to that soon enough. But I just thought that was interesting. There's the Seekers from Adari, like there's the whole from Adar. It's the whole thing of she's like, shut them up, because like, yeah, they're not they're spewing this hateful situation, because like they're one of the only places that allows cloning, and it's like clones are used as slaves and stuff like that. But obviously Ellison is kind of like, well, they have the right to say whatever they want, even though we might not agree with it. This is supposed to be a zone where everyone can say what they want. But I guess, in her mind, as someone who's been in that situation, who's been a clone, who's been a slave, it's like, no, there's no like being okay with that. There's no like, oh, understanding everyone's position. But the thing is, it's that complicated thing of like, you want to respect everyone's culture, but that's part of Adar's culture. So it's kind of like that thing of like, you can make parallels, but I was about to make a parallel, but I feel like that'd be too much of an extreme parallel to make, so I won't make the parallel. Whatever. Regardless, it's a complicated situation. You can understand both sides. You still lean more with Atria about the whole situation of like, yeah, like he kind of side with her being like the whole clones being slaves things, and it's still weird, because I knew she was a clone, but it's still kind of crazy to see like the clones, like, oh yeah, like I guess because in my mind, like you think clones, and for whatever reason I thought that they were like, I'm so stupid, I was just thinking manufactured humans. Honestly, I didn't think about the fact is, oh, of course all the clones are going to look like her. Didn't cross my mind. It's kind of sad too, because they're differentiated by numbers. Like the one we meet in this episode, that's 3, and it didn't click in my head, because like they made point to notice, like, because you have Jax in the first episode kind of point out the fact is that Atria is like the only one who has like purple hair and everything, and it's like, oh yeah, because she's standing out, because it's supposed to represent her having her own identity. As a clone, you kind of have to show like, hey, I'm my own person, I'm not bound by anyone else. So obviously her sisters are trying to fight. Well, they said brothers later on, so are there male clones too? I didn't remember seeing any, but they were talking about, but I guess maybe it's not just, maybe she's from the female clones, and there is a male clone branch. Immediately, because all this clone talk, it made me think about Orphan Black, which if you've never seen Orphan Black, I highly recommend. It's me even bringing it up in this conversation. I try not to talk about it, but it has a clone angle to it. So me even bringing it up in the same conversation already spoiled it anyway. But nevertheless, it's a really great show that I highly recommend everyone check out. The show is complete. It's a whole tangent. Like, there's another time for me to kind of gush about the show. But nevertheless, I think it's a similar parallel, because in that show, once again, kind of spoilers, there were the males and the female clones, so it's like maybe we saw the female side of the clones, but maybe we never saw the male side. But like I said, because that kind of caught me off guard, I was like, brothers, like, wait, there's male clones too? But I'm curious, is it just whatever, like semantics? I'm curious, like, is it the clone, like who the clones based on is what I'm curious about. Like, who's the originator of like the clones that Atria is based on? Is she even based on anyone? Or are the male clones based on that same person too, and just the chromosome is flipped? Or are they based on a different person, a male? Questions like that I find very interesting. Like I said, Orphan Black, without going too much in details, it handled it in its own way. Like, it was a different situation. It was a very similar circumstance, different situation in certain regards. Like I said, I won't get into it, but so I just thought that was all kind of fascinating. and she goes back to Adar pretending to be working under, you know, Creston. It's being like kind of, and it just the way he talks is so sleazy, because it's like, oh, clones, like of course they were meant to be, you know, servants and stuff, slaves, because it's like, oh, the fact of the matter is they have no soul. This is basically on the maker's will and stuff like that. So it's hard to say whether it seems like the Seekers are kind of like a religious group. It seems so cultish because of the outfits and stuff like that, but it seems like, I mean, they don't seem like that cultish, because at the same time it's like that's what everyone on Adar believes. So I guess like Seekers are just like the majority of people on Adar, just because that's just how it rolls. Or maybe it is kind of a fringe group, even though so many people believe that way. Maybe it's still a fringe group, whatever the case may be. I would assume not, but so you have the whole situation of, you know, because I really like the fact is that everyone did have her back, like, you know, Jacqueline, as well as I believe Thomas was there too, like backing her up, because they knew like how important this was. Because not only just because for Atria, this was also because like, no, we believe in this too. Like, it's wrong for you to kind of treat clones like they're not people, that they're just because they were manufactured, that makes them any less having rights to be people and stuff like that, which is interesting, because it's like, well, technically humans are made too, so it's just different circumstances. One is more biological while others more scientific, but when you actually break it down, there's a whole scientific angle to the whole thing. Like I said, I'm just going on a tangent. I just find the whole situation fascinating. That's probably a conversation in real life will probably never happen in my lifetime, but it doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. And it's just a complicated situation that, like I said, you still kind of lean more towards Atria with the whole situation. But nevertheless, she goes back to Adar, but home dude already knows. And also, I kind of skipped over it really quickly, but also like the creepy thing of like talking about all like the right places and stuff like that. It just the sexual nature he was spinning on it, like, ew, gross. That seems like someone's almost like your sex slave. That's what I don't like. That's what it would seem like it was applying, like, I don't know. But nevertheless, he knew it was her, because it sadly turns out like, oh, like this whole thing was a setup. He knew where, well, because she's number 9. It's like, oh, he knew where 9 was the entire time. So it's like, oh, let's get her. This whole thing, even 3 being like, oh, working with the resistance to blow up the cloning farm, essentially. It's like, oh yeah, like all of that was part of a plan. It was also interesting seeing 3 pretend to be her and everything, like how awkward she was around Thomas, and Thomas was like, oh, you know, I'm here. She's like, yeah, I appreciate it. You can tell, like, and even Atria was like, yeah, that was super convincing of you pretending to be me. And she's getting drunk, kissing Jax and kissing Thomas, and even one point trying to kiss Greg. He's like, no, I'm good. She's like, oh, but you're so cute. He's like, yeah, I've heard that from people. So I just thought that was kind of neat. But also, like, immediately Jax and Thomas were like, yeah, something's up with her. She's not acting like herself, not even knowing what chili cheese fries were, which I really appreciate they got Raylan hooked on, because he was like, I don't see the nutritional value. Actually, these are pretty good, you know, so. But there's also the complicated thing of, like, once again, like, the whole conversation of, like, oh, everyone should be able to speak their mind. Ellison isn't really backing, because it's like, oh, we can put in a formal complaint in Adar, but clones are their property, so anything we really say doesn't really matter, because they can kind of do their own thing when it comes to clones, which, you know, Jax is kind of upset, because it's like, you are so forward-thinking, and that just seems so backpedaling-ish, so it's like, you're an inspiration to both me and Atria, and even to the point, like, Atria was like, she was so disappointed to hear amongst anyone that he was the one that was kind of okay with them coming to the school to talk and stuff like that. It's like, no, just ban them, because, you know, their ideals aren't, you know, good, you know, essentially, you know. So, but we also learned the interesting thing, like this is what I was kind of referencing earlier, that Creston, interestingly enough, her master is Creston's son, Leonard, which is interesting, and it's like, oh, it turns out he wasn't killed, that she actually faked his death. She was like, oh, I killed him, but that's what I was bringing up earlier. It's like, do people at the school know that? Because I'm like, why did she, because she says it so nonchalantly, but it's like, did the people at the school really know the truth? And they're just like, oh yeah, we'll let her keep that up just because it's how she gets her independence. I mean, to be fair, Leonard had given her, like, emancipation, but the fact that he fell in love with, because he knows the difference between right and wrong, is kind of how Atria puts it. He fell in love with one of her sisters, number 6, and it's like they're married and everything and happy and stuff like that. It's like, oh, I was like, I thought the relationship was between them, because I almost forgot for a second. It's like, right, Atria and Thomas are kind of potentially, I think, as Greg kind of hinted towards that last episode. Obviously, like, you see that already, but still. So I just thought that was kind of fascinating, and it's like, and in the grand scheme of things, you find out like, okay, so it's like, oh, you want to bring your son back into the fold, but it's like you want to bring your son back into the fold because you're trying to be reelected as Seeker, and you need his approval. Like if you have your son backing you up, it sends a powerful message to the rest of the people. So that's all he wants, and it's like, oh, renounce your marriage to that creature. You know, I'm sure creature wasn't the exact word he used, but it was kind of in that parallel, almost like that abomination. And so that's all it was. It's a power move. Like, it's not like, oh, I love my son, I want him back in my life. It's like, no, I need you so I can win and be in this position again. So luckily, Xander showed up to help, especially when a whole bunch of clones ended up attacking Jacqueline. Also, side note, when she was kicking that dude's ass, she seemed like she was almost caught off guard by it by a little bit, but at the same time, it's just kind of like, oh, quick overlook. I'm like, did she have special training? Like, did she train before she even got to the academy? Did she do that, like, in between episodes? Was she trained on that? Or was it just supposed to be that, like, a little seed to show, like, whoa, she's actually good at fighting? Oh, we're just throwing that in there. We'll talk about it later. I'm curious of, like, what that meant. Like I said, it seems like kind of for a second you see her almost being like, did I just do that? But she doesn't really react. Like, that's her reaction, kind of caught off guard by it, but she immediately moves on. Also, like, Pilar, which is interesting. Like, for one, also, I was wrong. I was thinking, like, oh, is she like a robot or something like that? It's like, no, she just had cyber tech. And then the dude she's on the date with is kind of like, oh, yeah, do you have, like, neural stuff inside? It's like, oh, yeah, it's about pleasuring your partner or something. She's like, no, this date is over. Because he just kept pushing and pushing more about the cyber tech, which apparently she's had it since she was like 6 years old. What was it, 6 years and 4 months old? So, also, it wasn't even a real, like, live date. It was a virtual date, which I think, you know, a lot of that's kind of like, man, that'll probably be a thing in the future. I wonder, were they both holograms, or was he really there, but she was just the only hologram? I'm assuming he might have been one, too. Just that way you can just kind of be wherever you want to. Probably, have the date anywhere potentially because of that whole situation. Regardless, I just thought it was kind of interesting, and she was just kind of like, yeah. I also love that she ended up tagging along. I also love when, like, Jacqueline is trying to, like, distract those guards and everything. She's putting on a southern accent and all that, and then she's, like, trying to come up with some BS. It's like, right, I'm here because Atria, I'm trying to, her husk, and blah, 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 coming up with the lamest excuses, and they're just like, what are you even Pilar is like, what the hell are you talking about? So that was interesting. Luckily, Xander showed up, like I said, to help her with everything. Also, Raylan showed up, too, because apparently the Zatarians had taken Leonard in gave him asylum, essentially. And, you know, because for them, it's like, they don't believe in the whole clone thing either. For them, it's like, it's not like people should be enslaved. It's like people should be able to choose their own destiny. No one should be able to interpret what the maker decides anything should be. That's kind of the whole point that he's trying to make, which I thought was kind of interesting. Which was a whole conversation of like, really, it's interesting that coming from you, you know, because you kind of lost the war. We actually learned a little bit about that too. Like, Adar betrayed them. They were actually good with Zatarians, but they betrayed them and worked with Earth in the war. So I just thought that was kind of, well, humans specifically in the war, which I thought was kind of fascinating. And it seems like this is one of the main reasons why, because they took him in like this. So Adar was kind of like, nah, bump you, and decided to work against them. I also love Raylan kind of being defensive. It's like, no, we didn't lose the war. We signed a ceasefire. It's like, so Jacqueline's like, so that was, you guys are in a timeout. He's like, if I didn't know we were friends, I'd say you were interrogating me. But still, I just thought that was kind of fascinating. It was interesting too, because obviously, like, Atria could have killed Crescent. She wanted to, but Jacqueline stopped because it's like, that's not who you are. You know, that's the way he operates. That, you know, kind of show like you are different from them. You don't have to go down the path they do. Also, I love the fact is, like, Xander and her were talking. He was like, yeah, by the way, your safety's off. And she's kind of like, almost kind of annoyed at herself, and you hear her click the safety off. I just thought it was just a nice little detail like that. Also, them blowing up the farm. It's actually kind of sad when you actually think about it, because like a lot of those clones are dead. It's kind of morbid when you actually think about it, but at the same time, it's like, it's that whole thing of like, maybe death is a better option than, you know, well, it depends on, I mean, the explosion looked like it was pretty damn big, so it's like, you're assuming that entire facility, but it's like, it's a whole complicated thing. It's just kind of, we actually break that down and think about all the clones that potentially die in an explosion. It's kind of actually sad, but it's a thing of like, would death be better than being sold and kind of treated like a slave? It's like I said, it's just something morbid and sad to think about when you actually break that down. So, Atreya kind of feels like when it's all said and done, like, it's not going to change anything. Adar is still going to go about the whole cloning thing, but at the very least, it is a step in the right direction. Like, seeing her might inspire other clones to be like, no, she did it, she got free, I can do the same thing, So, obviously, we haven't seen the end of Creston potentially, so I'm curious, like, will he come after, Atreya in the future or not? Because for him, it's just kind of revenge, because it's like, you played a role in taking my son away from me, plus you kind of mock everything that we represent by you being out and about. It's like, that's why he was trying to bring her back into the fold and kill her, because it's just like, we don't need you spreading your free will propaganda, type of thing. So, we'll see. It also turns out that, Ellison was part of the resistance, so that's why he was kind of probably reluctant to make any moves, because he didn't want to jeopardize, the resistance on that front and stuff like that. I do like when they needed his help to get a ship and whatnot, and the guy's like, oh, he's like, have you eaten? He's like, oh yeah, I've already eaten, sir. He's like, oh, get some dessert. He's like, no, and kind of gives him a look. He's like, I'll go get some dessert, sir. It's like, just little things like that. Then there's the whole situation. Jacqueline ends up finding out the reason Xander is there. It's like, oh, were you spying on me? He's like, why would I spy on you? It's like, no, I figured as much. You were spying on Raylan, which is interesting because technically speaking, he probably is spying on Jacqueline to a certain extent. He probably can't really be as apparent with it as he is with the whole Raylan thing, just because it's like they're trying not to tip their hats about like everything associated with it. Which begs the question, like, everyone, like, that whole Raylan situation I thought was kind of fascinating, because it's like, oh, he figures out, it's like, oh, Osborn, you brought me in here because you believe I'm the one that did it. And it's like, it's like, I've got nothing to hide. What about you, Professor? I was like, that's interesting. Like, well, I was like, you flipped the script on him. It's like, oh, like, there's some secret stuff. You know what was up there, so you're like, oh, you've got stuff to hide. Is that what he was referencing? The later conversation, the whole situation with Regan, I'm like, he sets it up to basically be like, we know what really happened. There was like, you're the one that blew up the ship. The Zatarians wanted to destroy the ship and make it so that it didn't make it to Earth. I'm assuming it meant like, oh, it's going to destroy it. But maybe Raylan's father was insinuating, no, we can't let it go to Earth. We need to get it. We don't need to get it destroyed. We need to get it ourselves, potentially. But to make sure that there's no like records or anything that's up there, I think Osborn had the ship destroyed. Regan knows, which is interesting because apparently she knows about the Pandora thing too. It's like, who doesn't know? Xander knows, Ellison knows, and so does Regan. So it's like, how many people know? I doubt. Does every teacher at the school know? Obviously, none of her friends, none of the students know. It's probably like on a need to know basis, but it's just fascinating. Also, interesting enough, Regan's family. It's like, oh yeah, her business, her family business has ties to the cloning business, so the stunt they got pulled in this episode kind of hurts them bottom line. But Osborn's like, oh, if I had any idea what was going on, I would have told you, So it's like, okay, we're keeping secrets and stuff like that, but Regan's like, make sure you tell my father everything, which I doubt is the case. I'm sure Osborn's kind of like, I'm not telling you everything. So he's definitely a shady dude, but I think that's what Raylan was referring to, because I think Raylan figured out, it's like, no, we didn't get to the ship. You destroyed the ship because you knew we were going to take it. Not like I said, it seemed like it was insinuating like it was going to get destroyed, but now looking at it in retrospect, it might have meant like the Zatarians were going to take it, and it's like, oh, you destroyed the ship just so no one else potentially could take it and find out what secrets you're holding. So that's very fascinating in the grand scheme of things. So I'm very interested to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, along with all the like I said, the ripples from this. Like, like I said, it started a small seed of like the whole cloning thing potentially like changing. Once again, it's like a slow process, so it won't be something we see immediately taken in action, but I am curious to see potentially where they take that going forward as well. And now moving on to this week's episode of the 100. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. And first and foremost, there's the whole situation with the whole plan of like, okay, so how do we go about this whole thing? It's like Clark is back to being Clark, and this episode does clear out what I wasn't 100% sure of last episode about the Josephine thing. I didn't know if that was 100% Josephine there, or whether that was a fraction of her. It's like, no, that was Josephine there. So when Clark killed her, she wiped out Josephine, which is a little sad, but at the same time, you're like, oh, to be fair, Josephine Josephine really won't want her to kind of be kicking it around, because no matter what the circumstances is, she's one of those characters, like, if you left her life, she definitely would be an issue much later on, because out of any one of the primes, which all the primes borderline psychopaths, because the whole thing of like, but then they justify it, but like, I feel like it's so, once again, Josephine kind of points at Clark being kind of the psychopath as like, Josephine has some very psychopathic tendencies, and you know, it's also, you can tell it's still affecting Gabriel, because it's like, oh crap, she's gone. Like, I know I let her go, but now like knowing that she's gone is different, because at least this way it's like, well, she was in the body, we can grow old together, which once again I say that wouldn't have lasted anyway. She would have eventually jumped bodies because she's too afraid of death. All the primes are too afraid of death. But then there's a whole situation of like, knowing that she's gone forever, who knows? I mean, not unless they, I mean, doesn't, well, she wasn't backed up, I was about to say, because not unless they pulled a, altered carbon and she was backed up, but it's like, no, they only do that when, no, they don't back, well, yeah, it doesn't work like that. They don't back up drives. They store them away, but then, like, those drives can be wiped, like, Kayla and her family were wiped. But nevertheless, it's like, because I'm all over the place, so I do apologize. But getting right to it, it's like, okay, so how do we go about this whole situation? You have Octavia trying to talk to Bellamy. Bellamy's not really trying to listen to her, because it's like, really? I'm not listening to, you know, the one that's all about cannibalism and stuff like that, which, you know, Clark's like, Bellamy, and just Octavia's like, no, I got this. Bellamy, we need to talk. He's like, no. She's like, please, we need to talk. And so there's the whole thing about the anomaly. Once again, it's like, that's still kind of a background thing. I'm curious to see how that circles back around, but it's like, Octavia's special. She went in, she came out. But then there's the whole question about the toxins, and like from the red sun, it's like because the red sun exists, it's absorbed into plants. Even though it's like, oh, you don't need the red sun out to take advantage of the effect it has, because the toxin is basically in the rocks, the plants, and everything. And in fact, he was actually working on a bomb for the primes initially, like the whole situation, because he was initially trying to find a way to kind of utilize the red sun toxins in a different way, but obviously it was like Simone and Josephine. Maybe I kind of, for whatever reason in my head, kind of slightly put their name together when I said Jasmine. Regardless, they're the ones who are kind of more weaponizing it. He ended up accidentally stumbling across the process that he used on Octavia a little while back, about like whole kind of sending her on like an inner trip and everything. That was kind of more so in his side of things. But now that they know, like, oh, we can weaponize it, we can make a bomb, and we can make it so, well, that's actually what Bellamy ends up coming up with later on. It's like, okay, we activate a bomb, kind of drive them all a little crazy, bring down the shield, you go in, kill the primes, we get our friends. Sadly for everyone, like, the timing kind of sucks, because all, you know, they're together planning and everything. Gabriel's people show up, and, like, you know, Xavier has to reveal himself to be Gabriel, which his sister Lila's there, and she's super pissed, because it's the whole thing of, like, he's a hypocrite. He's this whole thing about, like, oh, against the primes and everything, but also it's like, my brother's been dead for 10 years, you've been pretending to be him. It's like, all you had to do was come clean, you know, that would have made things better, but for him, it's like, he was too ashamed. It's like, he stood for, like, no coming back after death, like, he no longer believed in what the primes believed in, like, whole coming, you know, resurrecting, and it's like, because of that aspect, he was too filled with shame about them, and he even said that before. So it's like, how can I admit the truth to you guys, because it would just make me a hypocrite and would have went against everything. But I guess he kept those principles alive when he was trying to pretend to be Xavier. Well, for a second he was like, the old man's dead. I was like, oh, are you going to pretend like, oh yeah, like, yeah, Gabriel's dead? But it's like, no, Xavier is too. And it's like, oh, so you're made true. I guess for him, it's like, I've lied long enough, it's time for you to know the truth. So obviously they didn't want to believe him about his situation, or even the fact is that Clark is no longer Josephine. But when the time comes, Octavia and Bellamy go off to kind of retrieve some of the some red toxins, specifically some plants that are heavily induced with the red toxins. It's actually interesting. It was kind of like some bonding, and I even love Gabriel had a line of like, yeah, they're probably going to use those toxins to kind of work out their brother-sister issue. But when it comes down to it, you know, Octavia is like, basically, like, what do I have to do, you know, when sorry isn't good enough? Because for her, she talks about the fact is everything she went through. Because obviously for Bellamy, because for her, she's like, I get it. Everything you did, leaving me behind, it was the right choice. I know how hard it was for you, but the fact is, I was a danger to you, myself, to everyone that we cared about. I was not in a good place. But thanks to everything, like, I'm back, I'm better. I went through the anomaly, kind of brings up the Dioza thing. In her mind, it's like, Dioza's dead because Dioza never came back. Once again, we don't know. We might circle back to that. I'm assuming we're circling back to it. There's no way that Dioza's storyline's done. Once again, the question becomes, is she going to come out with a little girl, Hope, or is she going to come out and her daughter, Hope, is like a teenager or a full-blown adult? Maybe Dioza did die. She lived a full life. Once again, what is it like inside of the anomaly? Is it a thing of just like time's moving? Like, you know, what did Octavia experience in there? Is there actually like a world inside of the anomaly where like time stops, where time doesn't exist, but the moment but it kind of exists, but at the same time it doesn't? Maybe it's like she was in there for like moments, but that moment, it could have been like a hyperbolic time chamber situation where it's like outside she was there for moments, on the inside she was there for months type of situation, because Gabriel made note of like her hair and everything and her being kind of cleaned and everything. So it seems like there's definitely just something there. It's not just like time's passing. It's like there might be a world inside that's just time either it doesn't move, which you would assume it does just because of her growing like hair and whatnot. But nevertheless, it's probably a thing for future moments. But regardless, kind of diving deeper into it, it's like that experience changed her, and it's like, all I want to do is get your forgiveness. Because obviously it's a hard thing for Bellamy, because it's like after everything that she's done, it's not the easiest thing. It's like, but she's like, I understand that. Like, the fact of the matter is, all I can do is beg for your forgiveness. I know it's not going to be the easiest thing for you to trust me again, but I want to know that I can get that trust back. And he's like, what do you want me to say? And she's like, just say that I'm your sister. It's like, you are my sister, but the fact of the matter is, you're not my responsibility anymore, which I feel like that's definitely going to be something we see trickle down later on. I hope it doesn't lead to a situation where it's like Octavia dies and now Bellamy has to live with that whole like, oh, we weren't necessarily good, but maybe we were. Because obviously you can see it hurts him, because it's like, because he sees that she's trying, but it's the whole thing of like, how can I really forget everything you've done? But to be fair, he's in that same situation with Clark. Clark did a lot of stuff, but he finds himself caring about her again. But he can understand why she did what she did. She did it for family. Octavia was just power tripping. But, you know, like she said, it's like, you were my rock. I was lost in the darkness, but now I found my way back, you know? So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where their relationship goes. But I do believe Octavia has changed. Like, that blood rain and stuff is definitely gone. Because later on, it's like a whole conversation. Because Clark's like, no, we got to save as many lives as possible. Even Octavia being like, yeah, we need to be a part of this. And it's like, okay. Because for Clark, she doesn't, because like Josephine had said, like, oh, it's going to be a Mount Weather situation all over again. It's like, no, I don't want that. Because it's not, let's not just take out, you know, and save our people. It's about also saving everyone, minimizing how many casualties there are, because she, you know, it's like, what did Monty say? We need to be better, and to honor Monty, we're going to be better, you know, because in, you know, Bellamy's mind is like, oh, we just need to save our people. It's like they come first, but that mentality has always been a thing of like, oh, let's put our people first. It's like, we got to put the greater good first. Like, just because we don't agree with these people and they've been fooled to believe that you know, the primes are deities, we can't, like, yeah, they're going to be our enemies, but we can't, you know, kill them just because they've been lied to their entire lives for generations upon generations. You know, it's something that's so ingrained in them, you can't blame them. It's like when you believe something so wholeheartedly because it's been a part of not your life, but your father's life, or your mother's life, and their parents' life, and their parents' parents' life. It's a whole thing, like I said. So it's very fascinating. But then, like, all at the same time, you had the whole situation where Murphy gets brought to by Russell, and Russell's like, John, you like to play both sides about everything. Everything is pretty much about what you gain out of it. He's like, oh, come on, don't say stuff like that. It's like, no. I actually respect that about you. He's like, I like that a lot. That means I can trust you, because it means that no matter what he does, he's always going to put his self-interest first. And it's like, I'm going to give you an option. You bring my daughter back, or it's going to be an eye for an eye situation if he fails. Like, okay. But it's like, no. I wasn't talking about your eye. I was talking about Imori's eye. And that was enough to get John's attention. So, also, is this the first time John's ever spoken that language? What would that language could be considered? Like, Tree Crew? The language? I guess I don't remember what the name of the language would specifically be. But it's like, has John spoken that before? I feel like I don't remember. I mean, to be fair, it might be the fact is that he was, well, because also, you know, Amori might be a reason why he learned it. But also, it's probably like, you know, Echo, all that time and space probably taught him. But obviously, they've been kicking it with like Tree Crew for such a long time. Like, yeah, obviously they were at war first, but then they became allies, so that might have been time. But I feel like I don't remember him speaking it in earlier seasons, so I wonder if that's something he picked up between season 4 and 5 when they were in space. But maybe before it didn't, and maybe just the first time he's really utilized it. Maybe there wasn't instance before. If you do know, let me know in the comments down below, because I don't remember ever hearing him speak it before. But like I said, I could be wrong. But when he was letting Echo know, like, yeah, like they're going to go to Becca's, look for Becca's book about this whole Maddie situation, which that was interesting too. When Maddie's like, Jackson, and then Jackson comes over and she tries to slice him, but she goes for the arm, because on the inside, Shiheda is like, okay, why'd you go for the arm? You should go for the neck, because it's like, no, Jackson's one of us. It's like, he's on our side. He's some of our people, so we can't kill him. But it's like, no, he's not. He's a pawn. This is all about a chess game. It's like, what you should have done was slit his throat. And because he's a pawn, that would have gotten you one step closer to being free. So you'd be one step closer to killing everyone responsible. It's like, I'm here because I want you to rule this world. I want you to get your revenge for Clark. And I'm like, which we know that Clark's alive, but it's like, I was like, oh, that's setting up some stuff, because now, and I think the reason why he's pushing, and that's even something Gaia says, like, the more time she spends in his state, the closer and more hold Shiheda has over her. So I'm like, okay, that's probably the point. He wants her to dive so deeply into the darkness so that he can take over her body. That's most likely it. Bury her like he's buried all the other commanders, so that the body can be his to kind of do whatever he wants to. It's almost like a resurrection in a sense, which obviously that kind of heavily correlates with the everything going on with the primes. I mean, it's a literal parallel, not even just parallel, the exact same situation, because obviously, like, the mind drive and the flame are literally the same thing, so it's not just parallels, it's literally the same thing. But regardless, so Murphy and the others show up. They don't even tell Murphy the truth about Clark, but because I guess it's the whole thing of like, well, one, we don't know where Murphy's loyalties lie, but I think it's also the situation of, well, we also, you know, keeping him in the dark means keeping everyone else in the dark, and, you know, Clark has to pretend to be Josephine. It's interesting too, because there's a whole conversation like, well, if the Primes have the bomb, why haven't they used it? But it's like, last thing they need is us running around, you know, being all savage and ready to kill. It's like, that'd be more of a nuisance for them. So turning us, you know, it'd be more of an issue, you know, if they kind of got their enemy, the children of Gabriel, all psychopathic. But it actually kind of divulged some interesting information where it was basically like, Jasmine, I did it again. I don't know, why do I keep saying Jasmine? Shut up, Michael. I'm sorry. Geez. Josephine and Simone, I was about to say Simon. Simone are, I'm messing up big time. I do apologize. But the two of them were testing the sun's effect on people. And then it turns out to the situation of like, okay, they did it on a whole bunch of test subjects to kind of see what it was capable of. Gabriel wasn't down for that, but it led to the situation of people who already kind of worshipped them as gods, saw them as some kind of deities, as gods, as angels. And in that state, their loyalty kind of reigned so supreme that even in that rage, they ended up killing the non-believers. So it kind of proved like, oh, how holy we are, that basically even in this state, or maybe it's supposed to represent the fact is that it drove that part in their brain because they were so delusional. It amplified their faith into a delusional state where it's like, oh, we killed the non-believers type of thing. It's like, jeez. So that's really interesting, kind of knowing that, once again, kind of showing you that like Simone and Josephine seem to be the most, everyone's just so copacetic about it, but they seem the most of like experimental about it. Once again, they definitely in Josephine, it's just, I think there's something lost about coming back and like, you just have, once again, you have no sympathy for life, no empathy. You just kind of look at it as like, oh, all you care about is the narcissism increases where it's like your life is more important. Like, because they still justify it as being like, oh, because even saying like Echo is going to be the next host, it's like, you're going to live because I get it, you did it for your family and whatnot. Which I was actually surprised Riker actually turned her in. I thought he'd stop her. I didn't know he'd actually turn her in. But once again, it is for the fact is his family hasn't been resurrected yet. So at the very least, he wants the system to keep going long enough so he can get his entire family back. And there's that aspect to it, but still, there's more to it. But I'll get to it in a second. It's just, once again, it's just the craziness of it all. Well, since I'm talking about it, let's talk about that angle of things of Riker still kind of caught in the middle, because the fact is, Echo points out, it's like, you didn't tell Russell everyone. You made it seem like it was just that dude from last episode. It's like, no, we told like a dozen people the truth, but you're not outing them. It's because there's a part of you that's conflicted. And for him, his confliction is actually kind of interesting, because for him, it's like, yes, I want to protect my family, but at the same time, it's like, if we tell people the truth, like, what's going to happen is the primes are going to be killed, because people will want blood. There's going to be guards that get killed. So basically, it's like, it's not just self-preservation. It's like, so much more blood will be spilled if the truth comes out. And it's like, if you could save so many lives just by killing one person, would you? And Echo doesn't say anything. He's like, of course you do. Which I guess that kind of correlates to her story to a certain extent. So, but it's also the thing of like, well, you know, she grew up to be a spy and everything, so it adds a little complicated angle to her story. But Riker, in the end, he kind of chooses, you know, to work on it, because once again, he's kind of putting like lives above hers. It's like sacrificing your one life, save so many lives, also make sure that I keep my family. That's even something Gabriel had talked about, because they were like, oh, Riker will let down. And she was like, no, Riker let me out of my cage. He just left it open because Simone was going to burn me at the stake. It's like, they would have burned you? And he's like, well, yeah, that's what they do to demons, which I guess is kind of a correlation between him and Blood Reina. You know, Octavio kind of being a demon for many years, kind of having a demon inside of her, and him being kind of viewed as a demon. So I think that's kind of where that kinship kind of comes from in a certain regard. Potentially the parallels between them. I'm using the word parallel a lot. Not just in this recording. I feel like I said it. I've been saying it a lot in general recordings, but regardless. But the whole fact, getting back to it, the whole point is that the fact is that Riker would never be okay with stopping what they're doing, because he's okay with it because it means keeping his family alive. Once again, that kind of comes first. What was really interesting, and I didn't expect this, is Echo tells Riker a story about herself, that basically Queen Naya and that whole situation, and her Echo and her friend Ash, that basically is like, Echo didn't put an arrow in a traitor like the Queen wanted. It's like, I need you to be my spy. I need you to be not afraid to be an assassin to kill. And she hesitated, and the arrow missed, because she couldn't kill the person. And so the Queen put her in position. It's like, all right, kill your friend Ash. Do it, or an arrow goes into both of you. And she tells her friend to kind of defend herself. And during the struggle, her friend Ash kills her. In that moment, I'm like, you're Echo. You took the name Ash to kind of remember your friend. It's like, no, Naya gave her the name Echo so that she could fit in, because it's like, oh, Echo, the girl that's supposed to go is a girl named Echo. And it's like, damn, to know that. And she even told Riker, it's like, that's something no one knows, which, well, in the grand scheme of things, real quick, I'm skipping around, but it's like, well, she ends up killing him, so literally no one knows that. The only person that's alive that probably would have known that would be him, because I'm sure, you know, Queen Naya, well, not sure, like, definitely Queen Naya is long dead, so I'm sure anyone else who potentially knew that is long dead, too, so he was, like, the only one. That means that's something she hasn't even told Bellamy, which is interesting, which I thought was kind of fascinating, but it's, like, essentially being, like, trying to say the parallels of it. It's, like, she's trying to say, like, because of that situation, it led to her going down the path she did, kind of becoming the person she did, doing the things she did. And he's trying to say, like, if you do this, you're just going to keep going deeper and deeper down this world. And obviously, it's already taking its toll on you now. It's going to be so much worse later on, because there's going to be more and more terrible things you're going to have to do for this one decision. So you let me go now, you don't have to go down that path. But he made his choice, and Echo says hesitation is death. Where he hesitated to do what he needed to do because he had second thoughts, she gutted him because, you know, couldn't take any chances because he was so flip-floppy. If you're not on our side, you're the enemy. So how that's going parallel with everything going forward, we'll see. But I thought it was kind of fascinating. Also, like, well, because I didn't talk about it, but the whole Gaia and Nate situation, I love that conversation between them. You know, because obviously there's a whole thing of like Murphy being a smartass and everything about like, oh, Maddie doing what she's doing. But it was obviously affecting Guy. She's like, no, because we can't let things, like I said, keep going this way, or Maddie's going to fall further and further under his influence. And Murphy's like, don't worry, it's all going to get figured out. Now, what I thought was kind of fascinating, though, is, Nate's like, why did you not follow her orders? Like, you were so intent on this situation of like, oh yeah, like believing in the flame, doing like you literally left when she banished you, but you came back. So why did you not follow her orders? It's because, for her, it's like, what was her exact wording? It was kind of like, so basically you had to do wrong to do the right thing, essentially. And it's like, oh yeah, I wish you kind of felt like that back when we were serving Blood Reina. Because sometimes you have to not follow orders, and that's the right thing to do. And the reason why, responding to Nate, she's like, that's why. It's like she learned from, like, the worst thing, forgiveness is one thing. So asking for forgiveness for not following orders is one thing, but repeating the same mistake is a whole crime in itself. And for her, it's like us following Blood Reina without question led to things playing out the way it did. And she's like, I wasn't going to make that mistake again, especially because she knows that Maddie could end up so much worse than Octavia was as Blood Reina. It could be catastrophic. So, but luckily they were able to get away because Nate was like, yeah, I'm not... ended up getting his ass kicked, but he ended up getting a knife so that they could get out. Also, Echo is a Nightblood now. So what does that mean for later on? I don't know. Because it's kind of interesting because that means more people in this at least adds 3 people in their group that are Nightbloods now. Clark, Echo, and now Maddie. So the question becomes like, okay, so what does that mean? I kind of feel like they're setting Echo up for something for that. I don't know. Like, since we got that little backstory to Echo, it fit this situation with Riker, but there could be future potential for what that can mean later on. I don't know. But you have Clark pretending to be Josephine and kind of going the motions. She's pretending like she's killing Layla, but in that moment she spared her. Layla's like, oh, that really isn't Josephine. And Bellamy's like, no, it's not. So she's going back and she's pretending to be her, and she does a very good job. I mean, to be fair, she spent enough time with Josephine to kind of get to know her personality. All she has to do is kind of reflect that. I mean, because she was conscious enough when their minds started melding more so that she could kind of hear. Like, at the very least, we know she could hear everything else that was being said when she was stuck in that in-between lane, but at the very least, I would assume she could hear everything that Josephine was saying as her. But it's like, oh, daddy, like, oh, no warm welcome or whatever. And then when it came to Maddie, she was like, oh, how many vials do you think we'll get out of her before she dies? And you see that look on Russell's face. It's like, yeah, he knows that's his daughter talking. She's like, whatever. When do I get my new mind drive? He's so happy to have his daughter back. She does a very good job, especially because she has to keep up that front to be like, oh, Clark is dead. Sorry. She put up a good fight. But Maddie's like, oh, I'm going to kill you all. I'm going to kill everyone that's important to you. And that moment, I'm like, ooh, this is definitely going to be interesting, because she doesn't know, because Clark didn't have the time to be like, Maddie, it's me, wink, 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 wink. So there's that whole thing, and obviously she has, Shaheda in her head being like, oh, kill everyone, get revenge for Clark. She's going to try and kill Josephine, because she's like, oh, Clark's already dead, I'm going to do right by her by killing you, not knowing that it's Clark. But they have 2 different missions. If she knew that Clark was alive, it would stop her from spiraling, because she doesn't know. Because I don't think that at the time, well, they have it, that never got explained to Clark about that. I mean, even Josephine, that never got explained to her, the Dark Commander situation. So, but even if it did, it was before the barriers between their minds started slipping through. So at that point, Clark wasn't aware inside of, Josephine's mind drive and just inside of herself. So she wouldn't have that information about what's going on with Maddie. So she wouldn't know of, like, the dangerous situation she potentially set in motion just now. So that's definitely complicated. And once again, Murphy doesn't know. He's going to perpetuate the lie, being like, yeah, Josephine's here. Sadly, Clark isn't alive, so everyone's going to start thinking that. But it's so interesting because, like I said, the difference is because you have Clark trying to save everyone, while you also have Maddie trying to kill everyone. So it's definitely going to be very, very interesting to see where all this ends up ultimately taking us going forward into the next episode. I'm very excited. We're down to 2 episodes left this season, I'm assuming. because they've kind of been on a more 13 episode level seasons. Obviously, there have been exceptions, so I'm curious. I haven't actually checked, but I'm assuming 13 for this one as well. So I only got a handful. We only got like 2 episodes left, so I am very interested to see what happens next. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good